Hello, I'm Don Goldman from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. And today I'm going to try and answer the very frequent questions I'm getting about the safety of COVID-19 vaccine in women who are pregnant or are trying to become pregnant. I'm going to look specifically at the two vaccines that are available right now in the United States. And as you know, those are the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. Both of these are messenger RNA vaccines that are relatively new in the vaccine landscape. These are technologically advanced and new platforms for delivering a vaccine to human beings. And we don't have a whole lot of data about their impact on pregnancy or, for that matter, on the fetus. I'll discuss that in greater detail in just a moment, but I want to make it clear I'm not going to talk about other vaccines or many other vaccines that are in development, some of which have been approved in other countries. And when the time comes, when they're available in the United States, I'll update this video with some information about them. So in ordinary times, vaccines that were going to be used in pregnancy would have undergone relatively extensive testing, certainly in animals and also in clinical trials or through clinical experience by administering them in people who happen to be pregnant when the vaccine was given. Uh, this is not an ordinary time, and the vaccines that we're using now in the United States have not undergone extensive testing. In fact, very little testing at all in animals, and women specifically who were not included in the clinical trials if they were pregnant. So the information we have available about the safety and in fact the effectiveness of these vaccines during pregnancy is really, really limited. So given the ongoing pandemic and our limited information about the use of these vaccines in pregnancy, how can a woman and a woman's family make an informed decision about what to do? So first, let's examine the rationale for believing that these vaccines would be of relatively low risk, in fact, of very low risk during pregnancy, or for that matter, for the fetus as well. Uh, we know that these RNA vaccines are not live virus vaccines. You are not giving a person a live virus that has any chance of causing an infection in the recipient. Furthermore, the RNA, the ribonucleic acid, when it enters a cell of a human being in order to provoke an immune response, does not enter the nucleus. The nucleus, you'll remember from biology, is where the DNA of our bodies is located, and that's where our genetic code is. So DNA is not going to be exposed to RNA that doesn't get into the nucleus. Furthermore, RNA is broken down, degraded by the cells very, very rapidly. So given this information, it seems theoretically quite unlikely that there'd be any impact on the genetics or on the well-being of either the mother or the fetus from an RNA vaccine. So I predict, I think the authorities that have looked at this predict that the risk of COVID-19 vaccines in pregnant women or to the fetus is extremely low. Remember, the caveat is we don't have a lot of data to back that up. That's a prediction based on what we know about the biology of these vaccines. So with that background, let's look at the other side of the coin. Is COVID-19 a major risk to pregnant individuals? And the answer is people who are pregnant are at greater risk, in fact, considerably greater risk than a normal, I shouldn't say normal, it's certainly normal to be pregnant, but people who are otherwise in good health. We know that women who acquire COVID-19 during pregnancy are more likely to have severe illness. They're more likely to be admitted to the hospital. They're more likely to require mechanical ventilation to support their breathings. So COVID-19 in pregnancy is a really serious matter. Furthermore, we are still in the midst of the pandemic. In fact, the risk now may be higher than it was at any time during the pandemic. So more severe disease, higher risk of acquiring the COVID-19 virus at this particular time. So with that background, with a theoretically low risk of the vaccine and a theoretically, in fact, real high risk of severe disease and acquiring COVID-19 in pregnancy, both the CDC and ACOG have recommended that vaccine be strongly considered in high priority populations. These are women who have high risk by virtue of their job. They may be frontline workers in healthcare, they may be emergency responders. For those people, the CDC and ACOG are quite clear you should be strongly considering, and I would strongly advocate taking the vaccine at this time. I'll post the links to the CDC and ACOG guidance at the end of this presentation. Now, what about for women who are not in these high risk situations or not the so-called priority population? Here, vaccination becomes a matter of personal choice, weighing the known risks of COVID-19 infection against the theoretically very small risk to the mother or the fetus during pregnancy. It's interesting. ACOG doesn't recommend that you even consult a physician about this choice. I mean, you could if you think that'd be helpful, but it's really very unlikely that your doctor is going to know more about the safety and effectiveness of the COVID vaccine than I'm telling you right now, or you can find on the CDC or ACOG websites. And certainly no physicians or expert groups recommend that you get pregnancy testing before getting the vaccine. This is a matter of personal choice based on available information. And personally, if it were my wife, if I were a lot younger and she were a lot younger, I would be recommending vaccination when its COVID vaccine is available for the non-high priority populations. So I would say that given the balance of evidence at this point, we have pretty good guidance for advising women who are pregnant or planning to become pregnant about getting a COVID vaccine. Remember, all the time, remember that we still are going to rely, even after you've been immunized, on social distancing, appropriate masking, appropriate hand hygiene, avoiding crowded and poorly ventilated spaces. That's the recommendation. That's the best protection you have. And until we've reached a point where the vast majority of the population is immunized, we're going to continue to be recommending these precautions for everybody. One final note that may be reassuring to you, during pregnancy, every agency, certainly the Center for Disease Control, recommends that influenza vaccine, which is a killed virus vaccine, there's no live virus in influenza vaccine, be administered to women who are pregnant. Because again, as with COVID, the risk of influenza in pregnancy is far, far greater than a really minuscule risk, in fact, no documented risk of influenza vaccine itself in pregnancy. So I hope that advice is helpful, and I'm always willing to answer any questions you may have offline.